Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. Are you in a daily stand-up? And is it easier to run those daily stand-ups than to stand up against business as usual? Businesses and people get in so many bad habits, but how do you break from the norm, in order to focus more on the customer and more on the why of how you do things? Is Agile the fix, and does Agile apply to the everyday person? Can this methodology or mindset be the fix? Matt Lemay is the author of Agile for Everybody, a co-founder and partner at Sudden Compass, and one of the keynotes at the 2019 MarTech East conference. And on this episode, we'll discuss Agile for Everybody, creating customer-first organizations, daily stand-ups, playing in a band, tiny URLs, mindsets and methodologies, MarTech East, and a lot more. So let's tune in to an Agile marketer with an Agile shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and career to date.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
My background is a little bit all over the place. I'll try to give you a relatively condensed version.
Okay.
So I was a professional musician way back in the day, teaching myself how to code so that we could afford to get from city to city, because the $10 a night we were making playing in bars all across America certainly wasn't cutting it.
What did you play?
I sang and played guitar.
Nice.
So it was a gloriously creative time. I definitely missed the rush of playing music every night for 30, 40 nights in a row. Don't miss terribly much else about the low-level touring life. But I'm glad I got a chance to do it when I was young and relatively indestructible. Came back to New York and moved back in with my folks, because when you're a musician, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Worked in marketing for a music nonprofit for a little while, and wound up getting into product completely by accident. I was the first product manager at Bitly in New York. Kind of made the case that a lot of the things I had learned being a musician and leading a band around are things that would help me as a product manager. You learn how to work with people who have different specialized expertise. You learn how to motivate people, especially when, you're up against considerable odds and challenging situations. And you learn whatever you need to learn to get things done in a, medium to high stakes environment at varying times. So had 3 years of trial by hot fire there. Wound up getting promoted to head of consumer product. Left Bitly after about 3 years. Started working with Songza in New York. Songza got acquired by Google, spent a little time at Google. Started to develop a pretty strong point of view about the realities of product management versus the theory of product management, and started writing and coaching and teaching and putting this perspective out there into the world about product management as a connective role, and what it means to be in a role where your mandate is really to connect and align people who have very specialized and distinct skill sets. That led me indirectly into the marketing world. I partnered with two fantastic business partners in a small consultancy called Sudden Compass in 2014. One of my business partners, Trisha Wong, who is a total powerhouse genius, came from the research world and had done a lot of work within marketing, helping to align marketing organizations and organizations at large around customer insights. So everything kind of converged for me around this idea of how to get cross-functional teams working together to understand customers through research and data. And that's really where I've lived for the last 5 years. So I wrote a book 2 years ago called Product Management in Practice, which was sharing a lot of those ideas and the perspective about product management. I wrote a book last year called Agile for Everybody, which is taking the ideas of the Agile movement, which really is all about the things I was discussing, getting cross-functional people working together to solve customer problems, and talking about what that looks like, not just within marketing or just within product, but for an entire organization. And I'm working on another book right now called One Page, 1 Hour, which is based on a little project that we put together, encouraging people to share more works in progress as a way of facilitating understanding and collaboration across functions and silos. So that's what I'm up to.
So what was the shortened URL world like at the time developing that product? Have you got a favorite shortened URL that you named for yourself at Bitly?
So the funny thing is, when I started, I was the first person whose name started with the letter M. So it's not a short URL per se, but I did at one point have the email address m@bit.ly,
Nice.
which I was very proud of.
I bet you were. I bet you were.
That was, yeah, that was a sweet perk of the job for sure.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting you at after hearing you speak as the opening keynote following Scott Brinker at the MarTech East conference in Boston in 2019, and very much enjoyed your presentation. And give me what your thoughts on the conference as a whole were as well.
Thanks, and I enjoyed our conversation enormously as well.
Yeah.
It's such a treat. In my life, I am a generalist, and I love being a generalist. And part of what I love about going to conferences like MarTech East is getting to talk to people like yourself who have such a depth of knowledge on topics like MarTech and marketing, where my knowledge could always stand to be deeper and more expanded. It was so mind-blowing. It was such a treat walking into this world of people who are thinking with such depth and such care about marketing technology, which is such a huge part. Having worked cross-functionally in organizations, MarTech tools are being used by product teams. They're being built by product teams. They're being used by marketing teams. They're being built. It's really a focal point for this movement towards cross-functional collaborative building and working. And, all the folks at their door, Scott Brinker, who, I followed his work for a long time.
Sure.
It was everything I hoped for and more.
Yeah. Well, it's very flattering and humbling for somebody who's, delivering that keynote to say something complimentary to a guy that was, 100 rows back. So you gave a hell of a speech that needed to be said, especially in this space. And, after when we spoke, I think what took me back was the fact that you had more of a human-centric and approach towards marketing technology, and I thought that was very smart of Scott and the Third Door team to bring in somebody that didn't just talk about here's all the crazy tech tools and AI, and we could have gone there very easily, but yours was really, even though it specifically was about agile marketing, it you really covered sort of that human-centric approach towards marketing, and I'm curious as to how that came about in your thinking.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it for me is that coming from all these different worlds, when I started out in music and I was in marketing for the nonprofit world, then I was working in product, and I was working as a product leader, then I was coming in through marketing and insights. When you've seen modern organizations from that many different angles, the constant is people. And you realize that the human element is, I think, far and away the most deterministic element in terms of what sticks and what succeeds and what people care about. I mean, a conference is a really good example, right? Because for all the exhibitors that are going on, the relationships that people are making, the conversations they're having, the shared interests, the things they care about, that's what really drives outcomes. That's what people remember. That's what they care about. And, when Scott shared his thoughts at the beginning of the conference, I really appreciated him pointing out that, MarTech has kind of gone through this, to use the Gartner hype cycle. It hit this, the peak of inflated expectations. Now it's going through the trough of despair. But as expectations get realigned, I think it's inevitable. I saw this happen with big data a couple of years ago as well.
Yeah.
When everybody said, "Oh, we'll just have a Hadoop cluster and we'll be able to know people better than they understand themselves." But I feel like once the hype around technology starts to fade, it inevitably winds up coming back to people, because at the end of the day, these are tools built for people by people, trying to sell things to people, and it's always exciting. I think it's happening. It's funny how that's playing out in the Agile world too. With a lot of these scaled Agile frameworks like SAFe, they just released their first preview of SAFe 5.0, and they put the customer right in the center of their model.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes back to that. It all comes back to these truths that we've known in the business world for a long time. But I feel like every time a particular technology or type of technology gets hyped up, we all kind of try to convince ourselves that we can outsmart ourselves as people, that if we have interesting enough technology, we don't have to communicate with each other. We don't have to resolve conflict. We can just, the technology will take care of it for us.
Exactly.
And then we inevitably hit this inflection point where it's like, nope, we're all people. We got to figure this stuff out. And those are the moments where I'm just really excited to have a seat at the table and to get to talk about these things.
Agreed. Well, and I used to work in big data at Axiom, so if I had a nickel for every time I heard the phrase Hadoop cluster, I would be a very wealthy man. But I think what you're talking about is really catnip to me, especially with keeping the customer at the center, because just the human at the center. It seems like it's gotten so far amiss, and I'm simply, I think people are in awe when you look at what Scott does in particular with MarTech Lumascape, or the MarTech 5000, which is well past 7,000. I mean, it's just insane how much more quickly it's growing, and maybe it's because of digital transformation and how we talk about that now as far as the human aspect. Maybe that's what's moved some of this shift to actually talking about how people process it. I got a chance to read your book, Agile for Everybody, Creating Fast, Flexible, and Customer-First Organizations. And fantastic book. It was wonderful that they had copies of it. Help define in your mind what agile marketing is and what it isn't, please.
Sure. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm about to give a talk at a conference in London called Why Agile is for Everybody and Why Everybody Hates Agile. And the answer I keep coming back to is that Agile is an idea a bunch of people came up with over a weekend and captured in a 68-word statement of values. That's why Agile is for everybody. But that's also why everybody hates Agile, because that means that, there's a lot of room. There is a lot of interpretive leeway when you're starting with something as simple as a statement of values, and there are 12 principles of Agile software development that go along with it. Agile was never intended to be a prescriptive, rigid methodology. It was really a movement intended to unite people around this idea that our job is to deliver valuable things to our customers and to work together doing that. And there's another, people get fatigued with the Agile Manifesto, which I understand, but 68 words can be really powerful.
Sure.
And just because something is plainly stated doesn't mean that the ramifications of it are not meaningful, substantive, and complex. So, one thing I've been thinking about a lot in the Agile Manifesto, one of the statements of value is working software over comprehensive documentation, which seems straightforward enough, right? We want to put stuff out there that people can use and that we can learn from. Sure, why not? We can all agree to that. But if you look at the hierarchy within most modern organizations, the people at the top of the org chart aren't making working software, they're making plans.
Exactly. Which I think you said in your speech is groups don't necessarily want it to mean the same thing, and I thought that clarification was really smart.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my, part of why I wanted to write this book was my first experience with Agile was having company leadership at a place where I worked saying, Agile is going to mean we can get twice the work done in half the time.
Exactly.
And that is, a common saying. Jeff Sutherland, who is one of the signers of the Agile Manifesto, one of the co-creators of Scrum, brilliant person, wrote a book called Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And when you dig in and actually engage deeply with what he's saying, there's a really solid point there. But I think a lot of people just take that idea of speed or productivity or getting more things done and stop there and say that Agile means we're going to be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, but faster and better, whatever that means. And inevitably, that runs up against some pretty major problems. And I think that the fallout from that, the ramifications of that, leave a lot of people deeply skeptical towards the Agile movement, especially a lot of people coming from a product and engineering background. And as Agile begins to be more interesting to marketers, I think it's really critical that we take some time to think about what this really means and what it asks of us. Right? Ask not what Agile can do for you, ask what you can do for Agile, because in a funny way, Agile is asking a lot more of us. It's asking us to be outside of our comfort zone, to think about our customers before we think about ourselves, to think about our organization and the way we work together before we think about our own individual recognition and our own individual advancement. That's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if we set about, if I mentioned in the talk that the word agile is kind of being thrown in front of things now the same way that digital was.
Digital, big data, I love that. Yeah. I mean, all those
Yeah,
buzzwords that you hear. I said yesterday at a conference when I spoke that every time I heard the word persona, a baby kitten dies, because it's another one of the buzzwords that everybody's regurgitating. Agile's going to get there.
Yeah, and with digital, it's one of those things that's just specific enough that people kind of know what it means. I think the same thing is true with Agile.
Right.
But you can get, you can have an Agile marketing initiative going on and an Agile product initiative going on and the CEOs talking about Agile, and they all mean entirely different things. And each of those is shorthand for basically more of what I want. Mm-hmm. And that's a real challenge for us to work through together.
So were you seeing anything specifically that people were doing wrong? And the reason why I asked that is, I mean, I like the book in that it helps redefine the mindset to understand that better mm-hmm. than we were doing. But that obviously drove you to want to write a book based on some things probably that you were seeing done wrong, and you recognize that this was the opportunity to help define that in a clear way. So in your words, what were you seeing that was being done wrong or maybe thought wrongly about Agile?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because this is it's funny. I think there's been a debate in the Agile community at large about whether Agile is a methodology or a mindset.
Yes, exactly.
And to me, the idea that that's a binary is exactly what a lot of folks are getting wrong about Agile. That it's not enough to say, oh yeah, we're just going to change the way we think, nor is it enough to say we're going to change the way we work and we don't know why. The real challenge of the Agile movement, as is true of any movement that involves new ways of working but is rooted in a statement of values, is for us to do the work of keeping these things aligned, to say we do need to change the way we work, and we need to change the way we think, and we need to make sure that the way we work reflects the way we think, and vice versa. That is a really, really, really challenging thing to do in any kind of transformation. And I think this battle between the kind of Agile practitioner, certification, follow this framework to the letter people, and the let's throw out all the frameworks and just change the way we think people is a false battle, because ideally those two things should be working in service of each other.
At a high level, for the average marketer who may be, hopefully involved in some sort of product design focused on mm-hmm. the customer, what do you want people to remember? And it's something you just said that spurs this question. If you think about it, like of all the different practices that are out there, all the different things that we have to learn, let's say I'm bringing one up, design thinking. You start pulling design thinking together with agile marketing, but when you think about all the different types of practices and you pull them all together, that makes you a marketer or a MarTechniker. I'm going to make that phrase up. What do you want them to remember about agile marketing in their day-to-day focus? I mean, when they read this book and they're sitting down and working on their products and teams, what's the core part of the book that you want people to help think more like you, for lack of a better phrase?
That's a really, really good question. And the thing I keep coming back to, so in the book, I distilled out what I consider the three guiding principles of Agile for everybody. So if you were to look at the principles and the manifesto and the practices, if you were to look at Agile holistically as a movement, what are three things we can all align around across functions, across the type of work we're doing? And the thing I keep coming back to is we start with our customer, which is to say everything else we do, the way we do it, the way we think, the way we talk about the work we're doing, needs to start with our customer. We need to get out of this loop of doing what we've always done, mm-hmm. and then optimizing based on what we learn about our customers, and really open ourselves up to learning new things. One of the most interesting interviews I did for the book was with somebody who calls himself the donor whisperer, who works with nonprofits in the UK, who gave me a really, really good example, which is that we all receive a lot of direct mail from charities, and almost everyone I know has had the experience of receiving some beautifully formatted direct mail and wondering, why are they spending, this must cost a lot of money. Why are they spending all this money sending out direct mail? And the response they give is, well, we make more money back than we spend on it, so it's worth it. Which, sure, that's one place to start. But there are so many other opportunities to engage people in mission-based work. And what Agile would, I think, compel us to do if we're starting with our customers is to say we don't start with the kind of work we do and then optimize it based on our customers. We start by understanding our customers. We understand what they need, what they care about. A lot of the work my partners and I do at Sudden Compass is based on the same idea, that when you can get people to reflect on whether the work they're doing is discovery or optimization, and really understand that most of what modern businesses are doing is just optimizing things they've already been doing for a long time, there's so much untapped opportunity. And going back to the original topic of our conversation, the impediment to that isn't technology and it isn't frameworks and methodologies. It's the sense of safety and comfort and control that we feel doing things the way we've always done them and just optimizing them a little bit.
Could not agree
more.
more.
Yeah. So, what I tell people a lot when they say, oh, we're thinking about doing this Agile thing, is, what does that mean to you? Because if what you want to do is what you've always done, only faster, Agile isn't necessarily going to help you do that.
Exactly.
If what you want to do is start by really reevaluating some fundamental assumptions and then working together to figure out how we can solve problems in a new way, then let's go.
Well, like you, I started in tech and then migrated over to marketing. And so when I think about this, and it's the reason why I asked the question, I think a lot of people would think of it, whether it was Agile or Waterfall or any type of product marketing management, for example, you start thinking of it as sort of a checklist of things you've got to do, managing that process. But to what you just said, it's really more of that core fundamentals is the shift that you have to make. And I mean, one of the things that you talked about at the presentation, I love that was it's easier to run a daily stand-up than to stand up against business as usual. And just little things like that. That's not a checklist item. It's just stopping at the core of what you're doing to think differently.
Yeah, and it's really hard to do that, and most of us really don't have incentive to do that.
Exactly.
So it's I worked with one organization on the product side where they had an Agile consultant come in and tell them to do a daily stand-up meeting. And so they would every morning stand up for 10 minutes in complete silence and then sit back down. And I said, what are you doing? And I said, well, the consultant told us to stand up for 10 minutes every day. And I said, but why? I said, well, we don't know, but they told us that that's how we're going to become Agile. So, yeah. And I've told that story many times, and people are like, that doesn't make any sense, but a lot of this doesn't make any sense. That's the thing. If you don't know why you're doing something, then it can't succeed because you haven't defined what success means. I worked with another organization. This is one of my favorite stories. One thing that is a common practice in Agile is having a backlog of things you could work on, and then you prioritize the backlog. One product owner I worked with, in a fit of rage, ripped up his team's backlog. He pulled it off the wall, ripped it up, and said, if it's important, we'll hear it from our customers, and if we're not hearing it from our customers, we shouldn't be talking about it. And that, to me, was such a clear moment of understanding the principles and the values, and understanding that if you really subscribe to those principles and values, you're going to have to rip up the practices sometimes. You're going to have to just start over. You're going to have to find new ways of doing things. You mentioned design thinking, and one of the things that genuinely surprised me when I started researching the book, I expected to hear more stories from companies like, oh yeah, we did Agile and it worked, or we did Agile and it didn't work. And what I kept hearing instead was, We did Agile for a little while. It kind of worked. Some other people were doing design thinking, and it kind of worked. Some other people were doing lean startup, and it kind of worked. And then after a while, we realized that it's all mostly the same stuff.
Yeah.
And we were just finding our way iteratively towards ways of working that actually worked for us and lived up to the values we're trying to live up to. And, it's not quite Agile. It's not quite lean startup. It's not quite design thinking, but it works for us, and we keep working on it. And I think that is one of the hardest things for executives in particular to accept, that there is no silver bullet. There's no one way of working which gives you instant exponential operational gains.
Mm-hmm.
People have to be deeply engaged with the question of why they're working the way they are. And in a lot of cases, that brings up some really tough conversations that people do not want to have, but need to have if they actually want to change the way they work.
So help define as well then, another slide that you had that I thought was really interesting is we must give up the idea that only we as marketers truly understand the voice of the customer. That was one that
I
I
was
think.
hoping you were going to ask about that one.
Yeah, it's one of the ones that, and I sort of read through it in the book as well. But I really sort of reflected on that mentality as well as just how arrogant we as marketers can be to think that way. But I found it very easy to fall into that trap as well.
Well, it's not just marketers. That's the funny thing. My business partner, Trisha Wong, who comes from a marketing and insights background, keynoted at Mind the Product this year, and she gave that same talk to product managers because product managers say the same thing.
Yeah.
And this is one of the funny things that happens when we talk about customer centricity. People say, yes, we're putting the customer at the center. By the way, I'm the customer. So, the way that Trisha framed it, which is so great, is that in theory, we have user-centered design, but in reality, we have me-centered design.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a
dangerous,
damning but necessary truth, right? That, part of what's really challenging about true user-centric and customer-centric work is that we have to recognize that, my background is primarily in product, and part of why I like working with marketers is that they have ways of seeing and understanding the customer that are new to me. When I started working with marketers talking about some of the ways that they use personas, which are different from the ways that product managers use personas, when they're talking about segmentation. Segmentation was a fairly new concept to me when I started working with marketers, and my immediate reaction was to be like, that's dumb, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's an oversimplification. But then when I started understanding more of the goals and metrics and what marketing is working towards, what they're accountable for, these are all good tools when we use them together and when we recognize that there is no one complete stand-in for understanding the customer. But it's really hard to do that. It's hard to say there's a whole world out there of ways of understanding people that I just haven't been exposed to, and I'm going to actually open myself up to learning about those. It's challenging. It means giving up some of our sense of mastery and expertise, and that is not something people are generally quick to give up.
Then how does a marketer or executive, how do they start getting aligned, I guess, towards this type of thinking? Because I think often, with a lot of these, whether it's mindsets, contextually, however you want to define it, I think it's very hard for a lot of people to get started to think that way,
yes.
or to start making those changes. When you're going in and talking to clients, or you're talking to 1,000+ marketers sitting in a keynote, how do you sort of inspire them to start moving forward to think and move forward in that direction?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And one of the things I'm proudest of in the book is at the end of each chapter, and there are not many chapters, there's some suggestions for some quick things you can try to begin putting these principles into practice. And
it's
some of those are
like
specific
you gave
to marketing.
Us a sudden compass at the end of each chapter.
There you
see what I did there?
I did not pay for that, for the record. That was spontaneous. But that's, I mean, I think, again, there's kind of this chicken and egg question when you're dealing with mindset and practice of, do you have to wait till you're thinking differently to do things differently? Or do you start doing things differently and wait to think differently? And to me, the answer is start doing things differently, but you know why. You know what the goals are. You know what the values are that you're trying to put into practice. So, I mentioned it's easier to do a daily stand-up than to stand up to business as usual. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try a daily stand-up and see what happens, right?
Agreed.
In a lot of teams I've worked with, I think it all depends on the framing you go in with. If you say, we're going to do a daily stand-up and suddenly we're going to be agile, then you're destined to fail. But if you say, we're going to do a daily stand-up, the goal is for our team to be able to get each other unblocked more quickly, and it's rooted in this value of collaboration. And we're going to check in every couple of weeks to see if we're living up to those values and if we're achieving our goals, then it's almost impossible for it to fail because whatever you learn gets folded back into the way you approach things. It's interesting. I was looking back over the video, and the biggest laugh of the whole talk was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be when I said, Agile means good and fast, but I think people didn't know if I was joking or not,
Right.
which is its own thing. But when I was talking about how Agile marketers take on the practices of Agile product teams, and I said, they do a stand-up, we'll do a stand-up. They write user stories, we'll write user stories. They do retrospectives. That's hard. We're not going to do retrospectives. That got the biggest laugh of the whole talk. And I think that was a moment of genuine emotional release for some people, because retrospecting, actually taking time to ask those questions, to say, why are we doing this? If we started by just trying to have a daily stand-up once a day or once every 2 days or once a week, that's easy. But the part where it starts to get harder is when we take the time to say, did this achieve its goals? Did this live up to our values? How do we change what we're doing? That asks you to think really critically and to talk about things that are uncomfortable to talk about. And in the absence of that retrospection, it's really hard to ever move forward. So usually the way I set things up with teams is, let's start with a really small experiment, a really small change to the way we're working that has both a goal and a value attached to it. And then let's meet up in 2 weeks or a month or a week and start retrospecting and seeing how things change. And a lot can happen from there.
Well, and I think one of the things I enjoyed about it as I read through the book as well, and I started thinking how this would apply if you went in to meet with a client, is not only does it help shift some of their mindset, what it also seems to me, at least made me think a little bit more differently about it, is I started thinking more about how the average marketer would start thinking of technology in sort of a product management kind of way, because not every marketer is neck deep in technology. They may be involved with it, but then there becomes a lot of friction sometimes between marketing and IT because of the convergence that we have. And at least this helped expand their mindset, if you will, into thinking not only just as a thinking of change. I mean, when you just think of how stagnant so many daily stand-ups can be. I mean, this book wasn't written necessarily to make them think of it as a product marketer. It's stop doing things the same way you're always used to, and that's going to make you a better marketer. And I thought that it was just something that made me start thinking to how marketers start thinking more with a IT mindset. And that's probably saying it the wrong way, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and part of the beauty of Agile to me is that you do get marketers thinking with an IT mindset. You get IT folks thinking with a marketing mindset. You get product managers thinking with a sales mindset. You get really a true mind share that's much harder to come by in a traditional siloed environment.
Well, we know that they are coming together. We know, marketing and technology are coming together. There's that friction in the middle that takes a better understanding of all sides, not just the marketers and the technologists, but also finance, the executive teams, everybody else that need to understand how they converge instead of just titles and teams that people work on. So, Matt, I'm certain that you probably don't see a lot of this. I can't tell you. I've never done a dive off the coast of Oregon because it's too cold. I'm not even certain what types of sharks migrate a lot through Oregon other than the normal cold water sharks. But what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
My favorite kind of shark is the lemon shark.
Really? I've only had one other person talk about the lemon shark before. Why the lemon shark?
So there's a number of conservationists in Florida who I follow on Instagram, largely for their alligator photos.
Okay.
A lot of folks at the Everglades Outpost, Chris Gillette, Gator Boys Chris, I'm a big fan of alligators and crocodilians in general. And Chris posted a photo a while ago of a lemon shark whose name I believe was Snooky or Snooker, the lemon shark, and it was a real cute shark. I just looked at that photo and I was like, look at that smile, look at that shark.
Yeah,
that's a great shark.
Real cute smile. Had a good set of teeth. So, well, Matt, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting, important questions you're going to be asked today?
I am now.
All right. Number 1. Here's a good MarTech East question: marketing or technology?
Both.
Now you got to pick one or the other. It's Sophie's choice in this case.
All right. In that case, I'm going to go with marketing because, as Scott Brinker said, MarTech is marketing. So therefore,
there you go. That's a good equals.
Marketing it is.
Number 2. Notice this from your background as well. NYU or Brown University? Where you've taught or the alma mater?
So I chose Brown University because I came from New York, so going to NYU made no sense to me. So I'm going to qualify that one. I'm going to say for me, Brown University, because growing up in New York, I did not feel the need to go to college in New York. But if you're from anywhere other than New York, I'd probably go with New York University.
Gotcha. Number 3, singing in a band or product marketing?
Ooh, I mean, I got to go with singing in a band because that's I learned so much from that experience, and it's something that still makes me nervous.
Yeah, if you'd said product marketing, I would have had to yell nerd alert immediately. So no, I would immediately go with singing. So, all right, number 4. I'll flip this one because you just brought it up, and I appreciate anybody that appreciates animals, in conservancies that they're watching. Number 4 is alligators or crocodiles.
Oh,
there's a lot more crocodiles in Florida now than there used to be. So I'm sure you're seeing quite a few pictures if you're watching the Everglades.
Yep, I'm going to go with alligators just because most of the ones I know best from Instagram are alligators.
Yeah.
So that's
well, and
my
they're
bias,
native,
my proximity bias.
Yeah, and they're native to Florida, and they've got a football team, although not a very good football team, but or hasn't been as good as they used to be. But that used to have a great coach. All right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread? Something you can find very close to where you are today.
Yeah, biscuits every time.
Good man. All right, so Matt, where can people find out more about you, keep up with your thought leadership in the space, grab a copy of Agile for Everybody, and more?
Yes, so you can go to mattlemay.com, which is my personal website, which has a lot of stuff I've written. You can go to suddencompass.com to learn more about the work we do together. Right now, I would actually like it the most if you went to onepageonehour.com. That's all spelled out, O-N-E page, O-N-E hour. Because I am so excited. Thank you. I'm so excited about this simple but radical idea of people sharing more incomplete and unfinished things with each other so that we can understand each other's work better.
That's fantastic.
So,
well, again, Matt, thank you very much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you so much, Kenneth/Shark.
You got it.
Yeah.
So there was my conversation with Matt Lemay, the author of Agile for Everybody, a co-founder and partner at Sudden Compass, and one of the keynotes at the 2019 MarTech East conference. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, when we were discussing MarTech East, one point he made still rings true. What's really driving the change is not necessarily just the tech, but the people behind the tech. It inevitably comes back to people. It's true, and it means it's up to us to fix this. Second, there is a lot of interpretive leeway as to what Agile software development is and whether Agile is a methodology or a mindset. As he said, this shouldn't be a binary decision. And I quote, "The challenge of the Agile movement is to change the way we work, the way we think, and we need to make sure the way we work reflects the way we think. True. Just look at how you do your daily stand-ups and get out of that rut. Third, get out of the habits you have today and be agile enough, if you will, to pivot and focus more on the customer. Don't start with your product or service. Start with your customer. There's so much untapped opportunity. As he said, and I quote, "The impediment to that isn't technology and isn't the framework and methodologies. It's the sense of safety and comfort and control that we feel doing things the way we've always done them and just optimizing them a little bit. It's taking a fresh look at your fundamentals." Great point. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Be agile in your thinking and focus today and every day on the customer and a little bit on sharks. Join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.